Now we go to one of my all-time favorites. One of my favorite franchises in the horror slasher genre, Friday the 13th. Anybody who knows me knows that I talk endlessly about horror films, slasher, suspense, all that stuff. And I gotta say, this franchise for me is definitely in the top five. Of course, anybody who knows me knows that Scream is my number one. Right now, I would put Halloween in second place, and I guess I can put Friday the 13th in third place, and then the rest of it being like Nightmare on Elm Street, and then I guess I can throw in, I guess Texas Chainsaw would be number five for me, and then of course outside of that, then you got the Chuckies and the other stuff like that. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm doing just as I said I would do by going through each of the movies, even if that means going back to the beginning, to the 70s and 80s, where things were a lot cheesier back then. But hey, nevertheless, a lot of them were still great movies. Halloween 78 was great. That gets a 9.5, maybe a 10. Actually, no, no. I'm just going to give that a straight up 10. The original Nightmare on Elm Street, 10. And this one right here, I can give this one maybe a 9.5. I think then again, this is harder for me to say between a 9.5 and a perfect 10 because the cheesiness kind of is what brings it down, but it's the content of the movie and what's going on and the suspense that builds that brings it up. I don't know. I'm not trying to make this, I didn't intend on making it this complicated, but 9.7, 9.8 maybe. But let me give you the Google synopsis and then ChatGPT, which is my favorite website now. So, Crystal Lake's history of murder doesn't deter counselors from setting up a summer camp in the woodsy area. Superstitious locals warn against it, but the fresh faced young people pay little heed to the old timers. They find themselves stalked by a brutal killer. As they're slashed, shot, and stabbed, the counselors struggle to stay alive against a merciless opponent. This one was pretty brutal to say the least. And I gotta say, this is probably the third time I've watched this film in my life. And for some reason, each time I watch it, it just gets better and better. And fun fact, Kevin Bacon was actually in this film, and I don't know why I didn't know or remember that. And for all I know, he probably doesn't remember he was in the film because he's gone on to do so many other things. But you know how it is with horror films. It's they're at the bottom of the list in terms of the different genres and the success and the popularity and recognition and all that stuff. You know how it goes. They just get the raw end of the deal. But nevertheless, I still love them. Now, I will say that the budget to box office ratio on this movie was pretty amazing for its time. The budget on this film was about $700,000, while the box office was just under 60 million. It's like 59.8 from what it says here. Distributed by Paramount Pictures and Warner Brothers. Now, the film is set at Camp Crystal Lake, a summer camp that is infamous due to a series of tragic events, including the drowning of a young boy, Jason Voorhees, in 1957, and the unsolved murders of two camp counselors the following year. Now, in 1980, a group of counselors are working to reopen the camp, but they are stalked and killed one by a mysterious killer. So, here are some of the themes and messages that are included in this film. Now, it doesn't make any sense to sit here and tell you, oh, spoiler alert. No, the movie came out in 1980, okay? Anybody who's a horror fan or even kind of a horror fan had seen this. And if you didn't, whatever. So, of course, we know that this was the only film where Jason Voorhees was not the killer because it was his mother, Pamela Voorhees. And he was the killer in every other film, including the remake. So, revenge and parental grief. The central theme of this film is revenge. Pamela's killing spree is driven by her grief and desire for revenge for her son's death. Her character embodies the dangerous lengths to which grief can drive someone. Negligence. A significant aspect of Jason's drowning was counselor negligence. This serves as a moral backdrop to the killings, suggesting that there are deadly consequences when people fail in their responsibilities. So, needless to say, what that means is two of the counselors, a guy and a girl, were supposed to be watching him, and they weren't because they were they were busy having their own fun in the building. So, what do you know? That's typical what do you call it? Trait, horror film trait. Is that what it's called? Why am I not? I'm blanking on the word. It's a trope, I guess that's what you call it. Horror film trope. So, fear of the unknown. The killer remains unseen for most of the movie, heightening the sense of mystery and fear. This unseen terror is a major theme in slasher films where danger lurks just out of sight. Isolation. The counselors are isolated in the woods, far from any help. The camp's remoteness amplifies the fear and helplessness of the characters as they realize there's no escape. Which, by the way, that's exactly why I would never go camping. That's exactly why I wouldn't go into the woods. And yeah, and don't get me wrong, for as peaceful as the woods may seem, for as, you're just away from civilization, you're away from, just everything, the city and just everything, major roads, buildings, all that. It's like, hey, just relaxing, wooded area, fresh air, near the lake, all that stuff. But still, I wouldn't do it. You can do it if you want to. I can't tell you what to do. Just, I'm not doing that. Let me see this one right here. Okay, I can skip that part because that's kind of obvious there. Messages. Neglecting responsibilities can lead to tragedy. Jason's death is a direct result of negligence, and the film subtly suggests that those who abandon their duties may face dire consequences. In a way, Pamela Voorhees sees herself as an enforcer of justice against those who let her son die. Revenge begets more violence. Survival instincts. Now, horror tropes introduce the final girl. Alice Hardy represents the final girl trope, a character type that survives the massacre due to her morality, intelligence, and survival instincts. This became a defining trait in many slasher films to follow. And yeah, there's some obvious examples of that. You have Nancy Thompson in the Freddy movies. You have Sidney Prescott in the Scream movies, and you have Laurie Strode in the Halloween movies. Now, gruesome deaths and special effects, mystery killer, all that. So here's the impact. It says, though not critically acclaimed upon release, Friday the 13th was a box office success and led to numerous sequels, eventually making Jason Voorhees a central character and horror icon in his own right. The film's blend of teenage drama, violence, and supernatural elements influenced many subsequent horror films and solidified its place as a cult classic. In summary, this film is a suspense-driven slasher that focuses on themes of revenge, neglect, and morality with a surprise twist in the killer's identity and lasting impact on horror tropes that have endured through decades of horror cinema. Now, here are the percentage ratings from at least 5 sources, and I gotta tell you, all of these numbers are much lower than they should be. I think that first of all, let me just start with the highest one here. The highest one is, the two highest ones are Internet Movie Database and Letterboxd. They both gave the film a 64%. Rotten Tomatoes gave it 63. Common Sense Media gave it 60. And I gotta tell you, Metacritic is the absolute worst. I thought Rotten Tomatoes was bad. Metacritic is way worse. They are way tougher on stuff. So if a lot of people and a lot of the media think of a specific movie, show, video game, whatever, as being anywhere between a 90 and 100%, Rotten Tomatoes would probably give it like 80, 85. Metacritic would give it like 60 to 65, maybe 70 at best. They gave this film a 22%. Metacritic, I can't stand you. What is wrong with you? Again, this is just my bias because I'm such a horror film fanatic. And yeah, Metacritic is terrible. So again, what would I give this movie? I'll say this. The movie gets a 9.5 from me. And this is definitely one that I would watch more than once. I've watched it 3 times since I first discovered it. I watched it once years ago. I watched it once again, I think last year, maybe 2 years ago. And then I just watched it again last week. Yeah. So these ratings reflect a mix of opinions with critics often less favorable than audiences who tend to appreciate the film's cult status and impact on the horror genre. Yeah, it definitely is one of them. It kind of broke new ground in that sense. So all of the Jason movies, most of them, are available right now to watch on Paramount. I think the remake is on Max, and Jason Goes to Hell, I believe you'd have to rent that on YouTube or Amazon. Same thing with Jason X. Now, Jason X, in my personal opinion, was probably one of my least favorites out of that. It was still good, kind of, but nowhere near as good as a lot of the others. some of the other ones I can't remember off top anyway, because as I was watching them, I kind of watched them all at once, so some of the scenes kind of mixed together with me. But nevertheless, and I also say I think they had a good cast here as well. This is Kevin Bacon was Jack. Of course, you have the main antagonist, Pamela Voorhees, played by Betsy Palmer. You have the main protagonist, Alice Hardy, played by Adrienne King. And then you have the other characters, Annie, Brenda, Marcy. They were played by Robbie Morgan, Bartram, and Janine Taylor, respectively. You had Bill, played by Harry Crosby. Crazy Ralph, played by Walt Gorney. And I don't know why it says Jason. Okay, Jason Voorhees, played by Ari Lemon. So, is it Lemon or Layman? Okay. And he shows up at the very end, comes out the water. You know how that all goes. This was definitely one of my, as far as singular favorite movie, like as far as like without a franchise, like just as a movie by itself, this is one of my favorites. I would put this for sure in the top 10. But as a franchise, if you're talking franchises specifically between Scream, Halloween, Jason, Freddy, Chucky, Texas Chainsaw, all that stuff, this one for me, I think ranks at number 3. So, a lot more horror films to talk about here. I got a lot more coming up. And I'm going to continue this marathon. It is our month, people. It is October. So, horror movie marathon. Of course, you know, most of us, we do horror movie marathon even outside of October, but this month especially. We watch horror films 24/7, January, February, April, June, July, August, December. We don't care. They're horror films and we're going to watch them. So, like and subscribe. I got more coming. Stay tuned.